go ahead and get started this evening. Thank you for being here. We have another special guest. Of course, when we moved back in May, Cameron showed me the list of speakers, and I told him, I said, "Man, this is like an all-star team of speakers that we have coming in for this series. This is awesome." And of course, last week we had to pull in a pinch hitter at the last moment, and he knocked it out of the park, and tonight we got another home run hitter here. If you've never had the pleasure of hearing Ralph speak, he is one of the finest. So looking forward to the message that he's bringing tonight. He is here with his wife, Joyce. Ralph spent, how many years were you at Freed-Hardeman? 39 years at Freed-Hardeman, of course in service there, and now he is retired. They have moved to Woodbury, where he is still, I'm sure, active in the church there and helping out in whatever way he can. Before he comes and delivers the message, I'd like to lead us in a prayer. Let's pray together. Our Almighty Father in heaven, we're so thankful for the people that you have gathered here together tonight. God, we're so thankful for Brother Ralph and his willingness not only to come and speak, but the blessing of the gift that you've given to him to be able to share your word. God, I ask that you bless him tonight, bless the message, fill each one of us with your spirit so that we can have an understanding of what he's saying. Help us to take it to heart. Help us to open our minds and our hearts to growing closer to you. God, we're so thankful for your son Jesus. We know without him we wouldn't be here, and it's through his name that we pray. Amen.
Card visa check. So I hear that Cameron is quarantining. I had him in several classes, and I'm sorry that his wife has COVID, but I'm glad that he's not here. No, I'm just kidding. I love Cameron. I really do. He is a special student. I love him very much. I'm glad that they are working here with you. I think Jerry Mercer was here last time I was here. He'd been here for a while, and he showed us, we got to look around the area a lot the last time we were here. Good to see Sister Biggs again. I remember her from before, and others of you I remember from before. And the guys over here, these are the happening people. Okay, the guys over here want to sing Lord Reign in Me. Over all the earth you reign on high, every mountain stream, every sunset sky. Lord, your one request, Lord, my only aim, is that you reign in me again. Lord, reign in me, reign in your power over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So once you reign in me again, you set me up. These people do not know this song. Yeah, I asked you if they knew it. You said, oh yeah, they know it. Yeah, that's all right. I ain't asking you again. Okay, let's see what we got then. A lot of us have struggled with the head versus heart. I was teaching a class just last night at the Woodbury Church of Christ, and I asked some of the guys, "Are you romantic?" And so one guy, a younger guy, was sitting there next to his wife, and he said, "Well, no, not really." And she goes, "I was just wondering how he was going to answer that." Well, men do struggle sometimes with the heart stuff. We struggle, with that. I grew up from a non-huggy family because that's just the way we were. I loved my mother. You could hug your mother, but what would you do with a dad, right? And I grew up in Middle Tennessee, near Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. So I never had hugged my dad before until I went off to college. I was trying to figure out, well, what do you do with a dad? I mean, a mama just fits, right? But what do you do with a dad? So sometimes you kind of get up next to each other, and you can kind of, rub shoulders or whatever. Or maybe you could kind of put your arm up there a little bit or whatever. But what you can't do, I figured, is that you just can't hug your dad. And it took me probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 months to learn to do that, because he didn't come from a hugging family. On the other hand, my wife came from, this is my wife Joyce right here. We've been married 50 years. And we got 4 daughters, because we don't want 5 daughters. Okay, and we got 8 grandchildren, and we're glad to be here tonight. But in her family, they were very touchy-feely. You know, I mean, hugged a lot. Her dad would go out, you know, go to the bank, come in, and he'd kiss his wife. And he'd go to the church building. He was a preacher. He'd go to the church building and come back and kiss his wife. Okay, and then he'd go out and mow the yard for a while. He'd come in and he'd kiss his wife. And I was thinking, I am marrying into a family with a serious hormone problem. You know, there's something going on here, because it wasn't natural. So I'm going to tell you right now that my word that I've chosen tonight is heart. And the reason why I've chosen that is because I have struggled with it some in my lifetime. So where do I point this? Where's the bouncer over there? Okay, so it would help if it was turned on. Yeah, there you go. Now let's try it. So is America in cardiac arrest, I ask? I don't know that this is a sermon. I think this is kind of like more like a class. But a lot of us would think that America is pretty close to cardiac arrest. You know, at least as far as the heart of our country is concerned, because we've changed so dramatically, and things just seem to be going in the opposite direction that the way that God would want it to go. But I do want you to remember that the church has always grown better under persecution. So even if it turns out that the church has persecuted some, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad deal. So when we think about it, much of America is in cardiac arrest. And I just threw together some pictures here on the internet. It's not hard to find these. Riots and burnings and protests and, you know, all that kind of stuff. People attacking the Capitol and people just unhappy. They're not at peace within themselves. And therefore, when we think about this, you might say, wow, I wonder if we had done a heart test on America, then what would it be like? Here's my favorite picture, because it is kind of touchy-feely. Here's Jesus behind this guy with blue jeans on, and this guy's holding a hammer in one hand and a nail in the other hand, and this is a guy that's been responsible for helping to crucify Jesus. You know, and yet here he is, this guy with dirty breeches and all that kind of stuff. Here he is trying to embrace this person. So that's what I think. I think that the churches of Christ, I'm going to give you an opinion here, because I go to several of them a year. I think that the churches of Christ, whenever you think about worship Him in spirit and in truth, we do pretty good in worshiping Him in truth, and we don't do quite as good as worshiping Him in spirit. You know, because whenever you think a lot about this, what it means is that a lot of people perceive us as being stoic and unemotional, and it's kind of like Tom Landry, for you older guys that he used to coach the Dallas Cowboys. You could look at his face, you could not tell if they were winning or losing, you know, because he had this same look on his face all the time. Well, to a lot of people, that's kind of the way that they view some of us in the churches of Christ. I'm not saying that's true about this congregation. I'm saying that it is often true. It is often true that we don't show a lot of emotion in our worship. And therefore, I want to talk about heart tonight. So, here's Palestine in the time of Jesus. And the reason I'm setting this up is because I'm going to be using Sermon on the Mount. And when we talk about the Sermon on the Mount, does this thing have a pointer on it? Yeah, it does. Okay, so here's the Sea of Galilee right here. And most of the time, I've been to Israel a couple of times, you will get on a boat at Capernaum, and then you will ride down this way, and then somebody's going to enact Jesus, you know, casting the net over the thing and all. He'll be dressed up like Jesus and stuff. And then you land at Tiberias there, and Tiberias is where my wife nearly broke her ankle. So we did have to go to the hospital there in Tiberias, and we learned a lot about the medical system in Israel at that point. But what I want you to see is that this is where Jesus was, somewhere in this area, somewhere. Now, this would be near Tiberias, and this is a lake that is 686 feet below sea level, you know, below sea level. In contrast, you know, New Orleans, that, you know, has sometimes problems with hurricanes and stuff, is only about 8 feet below sea level. All right, this is the lake that's not the lowest. Why? Because it has water that flows down into the Dead Sea, which is 1,100 feet below sea level. So most of us have never even passed a sign that says below sea level. But there are several of them in Israel. If you just ride around on the bus, and you'll see that often is the case. So where did Jesus do the Sermon on the Mount? Well, we don't know for sure. Here's a little idea of what he might have done prior to the Sermon on the Mount and where he did. He spent a lot of time, as you see right there, on the northern side of the Sea of Galilee. Sea of Galilee is about 7 miles by 11 miles. It's a pretty big lake. All right, so whenever you think about Jesus doing that then, that's where he gave this sermon. Now, might be the same sermon as Luke 6, very similar, but it's kind of different because in Luke 6, they were at a level place, and then in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, they were on a hillside. So there are such things as places that are level on a hillside. If you don't believe it, just come to Lafayette from the south, and you will see that you come up to this place. You definitely come up. So Lafayette is a level place that's on a hill. So don't tell me that they don't exist, because I know that they do. All right, so when we think about Matthew 5, 6, and 7 then, the Beatitudes overlooking the Sea of Galilee is a traditional site where Jesus gave sometimes called the Happitudes, but it doesn't exactly mean happy, but it kind of does mean, at peace with yourself, joyful, etc. And we actually took the Lord's Supper out in the yard of this place one time that we were there, because we were there on Sunday. And, of course, they mess up a lot of stuff in Israel while building a church building on top of it. Now, in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, if you want to know where the largest block of the teaching of Jesus about ethics is concerned, they'd be here. Ethics is how you live. Okay, ethics is therefore telling you how you should live your life. Now, Jesus has the right to tell you how to live your life. Number one, he's the Son of God. Number two, he lived a perfect life. I don't need to go to number three. Okay, why? Because he's the Son of God and he lived a perfect life. Or if he's the Son of God and lived a perfect life, then he has the right to tell us how to live our lives. So, what does he say here? Well, what I'm thinking that he says here is that he says stuff about our hearts. He's smart. And the reason why he's so smart is, he is, God himself, but not only that he knows the source of problems. The source of problems in America today is that we have a heart problem. The heart problem is that we're becoming more and more secular, and we're getting farther and farther away from God. The farther away from God that you get, the more you're going to have trouble in your life. You're going to have more trouble in your life if you move away from God. It's going to be true for the country. It's going to be true for a company that makes a certain product. It's going to be true for the church. It's going to be true for us individually. The farther away we get from God, we should expect that our lives are going to be messed up. So whenever we think about this then, it starts with the word happy. The word happy is sometimes rendered blessed, makarioi, in Greek, and it does mean that Jesus gives the blessed things here. Not exactly happy, but kind of close to the word happy. So here he challenges us to be better. He wants us to be better. He wants us to live in a way so that we are living at a higher plane than where we were when we started. And he wants you to be salt, and he wants you to be light. Okay, so I just had a baked potato at the Grecian restaurant. I asked the guys up here, where I should have eaten, and they told me the Mexican place. But anyway, we had the Grecian restaurant. It was good, and I had a baked potato. You ever try to eat a baked potato without salt? I didn't either. Okay, and the reason why is because I don't do that. I don't eat an egg without salt. You can't get it down. You can put it in your mouth. It just stays there. All right, so the Bible even says that you need to salt, eggs. All right, so whenever you think about it, no, it really does. Check it for yourself. Okay, all right, so, or what is there to eat salt without an egg without salt? All right, so is it important? Oh, yeah, you lied. Okay. Now, if I could do this, except I forgot my cell phone and left it in the car, but if all these lights went out and everybody in here turned on their cell phones, we'd have, not your flashlight, just turn on the regular cell phone, we'd have enough light in here to recognize each other. It doesn't take much light to disperse the darkness. And so he's asking you to be light. He's asking you to be salt and to make things better, the place where we live. So Jesus says these 5 things in his didactic pattern, which is his teaching pattern. He's teaching this to help them to remember, because they didn't have PowerPoint, okay? And they didn't have any way to remember it except to, remember it with their memories. And so here's what you could also call a mnemonic device, which is a memory device. All right, here's the way he says, you have heard that it hath been said, but I say to you. The prophets of old have said, but I say to you. Now, that tells you something different about Jesus. I just finished, like I said, 39 years of teaching, and I graded a lot of term papers in my lifetime, and I never assigned term papers that I didn't want them to document. Okay, I usually would have 10 to 12 page papers with 12 to 15 sources. That means you go out there and you find sources and you cite sources in your paper. Why? Because you are just a college kid and you're not smart enough to write this term paper without research. All right, so you need to research and try to get it right. Now, you know what, Jesus does not have to footnote. Why? Because he's God, and he would all the time be footnoting myself. Because that's all he needs to do is a footnote himself. Why? Because he's God, and he doesn't have to quote the rabbis. Shammai or Hillel or some of the other rabbis that would have existed then, he didn't have to quote them. But he does say, you have heard that it hath been said. He's referring to what they're talking about often. And that is, here are 5 things. Let me show you how the heart will help in these things. Number 1, what's coming about all 5? The cure for all 5 of these problems, which we deal with on a constant basis, the cure for all is the heart. The heart, the heart. Now, you might say, well, they're dumb to use the cardios. Cardiac, the Greek word cardios. Okay, they're dumb to use that word to talk about something where there are feelings. Oh, yeah? Well, try this. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Okay, we don't do that. All right, well, why do we not do that? We do the same thing, don't we? So don't call them too dumb, because as a matter of fact, we do it too. All right, so we know that this is not really the source of feelings, and we know that this is the source of feelings. But what is common about all 5? Well, all right, here we go. Number 1, what do you do about hatred and murder? Boy, there's a lot of that. Black lives matter, blue lives matter, lives matter. Both sides of the issue, hating each other sometimes, marching against each other sometimes, burning cars, breaking open stores, stealing stuff, pillaging, all of that stuff. Why? Because they hate. That's it. They hate. If they didn't hate, they would not do that. You don't get involved in something like that if you hate. I didn't go to school with a black person until I was in the 9th grade, because I grew up in a small community, Sandy Hook community, about 4 miles south of Mount Pleasant, and we didn't have any black people there that went to school with us. We did, but they went to school across the railroad tracks. Anybody remember that kind of stuff? They went to church somewhere else. They were segregated. And therefore, when I was in the 9th grade and went to school, my first black person, it was unusual to look at that. Do you know the last 5 years that my wife taught public school in Jackson, Tennessee, she taught 2nd grade. She taught 2, how many white students did you have in the last 5 years? She had 2 white students in the last 5 years that she taught. Why? Because she taught predominantly, almost all black students and a few Hispanics. And if you hate them, it's difficult to teach them. And if you hate them, it's difficult for them not to pick up on the fact that you hate them, whether they be Hispanic or Asian or whatever else. I hear there's a big Asian problem in some parts of the country because there's people that hate them. But in the traveling that I have done, I haven't done as much as some of you, but I've been to maybe 39 or 40 countries. Everywhere that I've been, somebody hates somebody. If you go to Sweden, they hate the Norwegians. They'll say, do you know how dumb the Norwegian, why the Norwegian took a piece of sandpaper in the desert? So he would have a road map. Okay, and so, and there's people that always feel bad about somebody else. I'm sure there's people, if you play ball around here, and I know that you do, they're your biggest rivals. And it's difficult sometimes to draw the line between rival and I hate you and I hope you die. So where do we get this from? No child is born with hatred. No child is born with hatred. Where does the hatred come from? Well, it comes from us. We have communicated it in some way or another because they're not naturally brought into the world thinking somehow or another, I hate somebody with a different color skin, or whose eyes are different, or whatever the physical characteristics might be. Jesus knows this. And so he says, you have heard that it hath been said, well, you could kind of hate somebody if you want to. You can hate the Gentiles. The Gentiles are worthy of hatred. Just don't kill them. You know, you have heard that it hath been said. But I say to you, murder, there's no such thing as intentional murder. I'm not talking about something that's accidental. There's no such thing as intentional murder that does not involve hatred. If you want to wipe out all murders, then stop hatred. Now, what's the lesson there? Starts in your heart. Let's say that together. 1, 2, 3. Starts in your heart. That's why people kill each other, because somehow or another there's some sort of hatred or love for themselves, whatever it is, that disregards somebody else as being fully human. You're not fully human. You ain't from here, are you? You know, and because of that, we kind of say, oh, man, you know, you must be really different. So, Jesus raises the bar and shows us that even anger is a problem. Now, you can be angry and do not sin, Ephesians 4:26, because Jesus himself was angry enough to take a scourge or a whip with several ends to it, take a scourge and to drive the money changers out of the temple. He probably did this twice. Once toward the first of his ministry and once toward the end. And he was angry. But he did not sin. So the sin is not anger, but the sin is, what does anger lead you to do? That's why elders are supposed to be people who are even in the temperament. Because if you get an elder with a quick trigger for a temper, it ain't good. Because something is going to happen, and all of a sudden, you got problems. So it's a person that has learned through maturity to be kind of even killed. Now, when you think about that, then, where's the cure to that? That's going to be the heart. What about this next one? You're going to want to know more about this than I'm going to say tonight. And I'm intentionally not going to say all the, you know, who's married to whom and who's divorced and who's going to hell and all that stuff. I ain't doing that. Matter of fact, I've never been smart enough to figure all that out. I am going to say this. I'm smart enough to figure this out. That adultery starts in your heart. You know, that's where it starts. It starts in your heart. You don't accidentally commit adultery. Because somewhere or another, you have started fantasizing in your brain or trying to figure out a way to get alone with this person that you think is pretty. Maybe when he left the house, maybe his wife didn't look her best. Why? Because she's going to be putting on her makeup in the mirror as she drives to work. You know, but one way or the other, maybe he doesn't look his best. And she's saying, boy, I got guys at the office that look a lot better than my husband. I got women at work that look a lot better than my wife. What a good deal, you know, whoever is connected with this woman must have. Then all of a sudden, that fantasy, you start working a plan to make it happen. Where does it start? In the heart. I'll say that again. 1, 2, 3. Starts in the heart. Okay, that's where it starts. Therefore, now, you can get in a bigger mess than I know how to clean up. All right? And that would mean, well, what do you do in this case? What do you do in this case? And what do you do in this case? There's a lot of scenarios there that I don't have. By the way, thank you for decorating for me coming tonight. Okay, but what I'm thinking is, I do know this, that it will start in the heart. My wife and I have been married for 50 years. How do you do that? Well, my dad, when he was asked that question on the occasion of my mom and dad's 50th wedding anniversary, and I just preached at the Sandy Hook Church of Christ, which is my hometown congregation, last Sunday. One of the elders there reminded me of this story. Your dad told this story, and I know that he did. I didn't make it up. So whenever my dad was asked, what's the secret to staying married for 50 years, he said, well, you don't die and you don't divorce. Okay, so there you go. But if you don't die and you don't divorce, you can stay married for 50 years. But what happens in the meantime is that we stop confessing each other as husband and wives. And because of that, then we have problems. Then before you know it, there's divorce court, and then there's custody battles, and then there's hard feelings on both sides that never get healed, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And where does all that start? In the heart. And what happens? I am not committing adultery yet physically, so a lot of people would say, it's okay if you fantasize. You know, pornography is okay. Pornography is not okay. And the reason why it's not okay is because it teaches you to objectify guys. If you're looking, at females, it teaches you to objectify the woman as though she is an object rather than a person. I mean, a woman with a mother and father. And therefore, it teaches you the wrong idea of what sex is really supposed to be like in the eyes of God. Okay, so where does it start? In the heart. Number 3, what about promises and vows? Well, promises and vows apparently don't mean a lot to a lot of people. That's why when we bought our house in Woodbury, it was time to sign the paperwork. We probably signed our name 35 times. Well, this paper is for so-and-so. This paper is for so-and-so. This paper is for so-and-so. And we're signing all these papers. Why? Because there are people that like to break their promises. They like to break their promises. And if they can get by with stiffing it to you, then they will. Therefore, we sign and we sign and we sign because we don't want to be in that situation. Jesus says in the church, however, there's a simple plan. And the simple plan is, let your yes be yes and your no be no. My dad was a builder of houses. And after he died in the year 2000, we were going through some of his papers where we found contracts where he and some others had built maybe 150 houses in Middle Tennessee. And the contracts that I saw were no longer than 2 pages. I mean, 2 pages. Agreed to build a house, 1,500 square feet, 3 bedrooms. And then my dad signed it, and then this other guy signed it, and then he built it. And that was just the way that it worked. Because you said you were going to do it. And if you said you were going to do it, then you did it. Well, but what if I have to say, I swear, I'm telling you the truth. Or let's get a little more serious. I swear on my mother's grave, I'm telling you the truth. I swear on my daddy's beard that I'm telling you the truth. I swear before the throne of God himself. Now, often, if a person has to use that language, you better be careful. Because I know people that would rather climb up a tree and tell a lie than to stand on the ground and tell the truth. Because they just seem to enjoy it. And so you ask, and by the way, how many times would you think a person would need to break their word to you before you start feeling like, that's not a person I should be friends with? Like even in high school, if a person says something and then all of a sudden they broke their promise, well then I wonder when the next time is going to be that you're going to have a serious conversation with that person other than just, hey, let's talk football. You're not going to talk anything real with that person because you can't trust them. Now, Jesus has the solution to that, and that is that in your heart, you make no promises that you do not intend to fulfill, and you do everything that you can to do it. It also means don't make any stupid promises that you know you can't. For instance, daddies often say, I'll always be with you, and I'll protect you, and nothing will ever happen to you. No daddy can do that unless you're next to her 24/7 until she dies. And even then, there are people that want to do harm to you enough that even if you were standing right there, they could overpower you and hurt your daughter. So don't make stupid promises. What you can say is, I will love you the rest of my life and I'll do everything that I can to protect you. But I also want you to know that there are some things that even I cannot do. All right, so whenever you think about this, make sure your promises before you make them. And then after you've made a promise, You know, and I say, Cameron, I'm going to come on September the 1st. Well, then we try to come September the 1st. All right, and have I ever made mistakes before about doubling up stuff on the schedule? Oh, yeah, I have. And I've had, it's a real problem whenever ever I have done that. But the point is that if I tell you I'm going to come, I'm going to do my best to come. All right, and that's the same way in the church. If people in the church treat each other that way, then you're going to have more unity than if somebody out there is spreading rumors and gossiping and lying and all that stuff. That stuff will probably tear up a church more than atheism will. I mean, gossip in the church. And by the way, you can be gossiping with the truth. But then you have to figure, well, what are my motives for telling you this? I know a preacher that was caught in so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And then you're spreading this around, and you say to yourself, well, why am I spreading this around? You can gossip with the truth. Why? Because you are a talebearer at heart, because that's your motive. Maybe it makes you look better in order to try to run somebody else down. But it is not ugly it is not pretty among God's people. Among God's people, we should try to be careful. All right, number 4, retaliation and forbearance. Any guys play football up here? Okay, so is there any such thing as retaliation in football? Like what? If somebody comes at you and they're playing a little dirty, well, then what you should do is just completely wipe them out and send them in the hospital. Or you play in baseball. Any retaliation in baseball? Yeah, somebody comes in, slides into second base with their cleats up in order to try to hit you in the knee or whatever. And then all of a sudden, everybody on the entire baseball field is out there beating up on each other like they were 4 years old. Retaliation, retaliation, retaliation. So America does this to China. China's got to do a little bit more to America. America's got to do a little bit more to China. And then before you know it, we are in a war with the biggest nation in the world. Now, how do you stop that? Well, you have to be a shock absorber. You ever been in a car that didn't have had bad shock absorbers? You go over a railroad track and and then 4 minutes later you're still Why? Because there's nothing to absorb the shock. Christians are to be shock absorbers. Why is that true? Well, Jesus gives you 3 illustrations. Right cheek, left cheek. One guy says when you run out of cheeks, you're out of trouble. No, the point that is here, if there's a person who wants to treat you that way, do not retaliate. Well, what about a person who wants to sue you in court and take your outer clothing away from you? Then Jesus would say, give them your inner clothing as well. Well, what if the Romans compelled me to go 1 mile? So an average Jew would know from his house a mile in any direction, because the law said that if a Roman came by a soldier and dropped his gear and says, pick it up, then you'd have to pick it up and take it a mile. So a good Jew would know exactly the end of the mile in this direction, and in this direction, and in that direction, and in that direction. Why? Because that was as far as he was required by law to do it. And then Jesus says, I want you to go the extra mile. I don't want to go the extra mile. What I want to do is bash him in the head. I want you to be a peacemaker, and I want you to go the extra mile. Now, girls, this does not mean that if a boy is abusing you on a date, that you should do nothing about it. What you should do is scream to the heavens and go talk to somebody that you trust and make sure that you don't get in that situation again. You are more valuable than that. No one should treat you in that way, so Jesus is not talking about that. That would not be retaliation. That would be protecting yourself from someone who's trying to harm you. And by the way, no boy is worth that. If you think that you have to put up with it because he's a guy who every girl wants to date, well, let me just tell you, he's a jerk, and he doesn't need to have a girl like you of quality who's trying to go to heaven. And guys, you don't treat girls like that. And why is that? Because they are made in the image of God. And since they are made in the image of God, you don't deserve to be treated that way, and you don't deserve to treat somebody in that way. But on the other hand, we are to be people who are looking for peace. And finally, well, this is like the acid test here. I don't know if this is the reason why Jesus mentions this last or not. I put some pictures up here of little Hispanic children because sometimes people think that, Hispanics are taking their jobs away, or Hispanics are, ruin the neighborhood, or whatever people happen to think. I don't know what people happen to think, but some of it's not good. But here's what Jesus would say about you. If somebody loves you, it is easy to love them back. Reciprocity. You can love them back because that ain't hard at all. If your grandmother loves you, is it difficult to love her back? It's not. But the acid test is this one. Can you pray for your enemies and love them? Love does not mean like. Love means that you desire the best for them, and you don't desire for them to go to hell, but you desire for them to go to heaven. It doesn't mean that you have to like all your enemies. That's a different word. But this word agape means, I desire for you the best in your life, and I do not desire for you that you die and go to hell. Whoa. Well, enemies. I had a few. Did the open forum for a few years at Freed Hardeman. People would come up and sometimes ask me in front of, have you ever been to the open forum before at Freed Hardeman? Usually there's a couple of thousand people in the auditorium and another 4,000 or 5,000 people that are listening online. And they'll just come up to the microphone and they'll just say, Brother Gilmore, you're a false teacher, and you need to repent. I've had that happen, I guess, 3 times. Now, at that point then, I'm thinking, you're not really following Matthew 18. You should have come to me personally first, and then we should have tried to work this out. And now we're trying to work it out live streaming so anybody can see what's happening out there. And they assume this is what ordinarily happens in the Church of Christ. But here's what I tried to do, and I got this advice from a fellow faculty member. Be gracious. Be gracious. Be gracious. What that means is I cannot say often what I want to say about how ignorant that situation is. And I can't say it. Why? Because as the moderator of the open forum, people are going to assume that since I have the advantage, I'm standing up there on the platform and these people are coming to the microphones, they have a tendency to want to have a sympathy for the person on the floor. So what do? I try to be gracious. So what's this heart stuff about that I've tried to talk to you about tonight? Well, I don't have time to talk to you about some stuff that I've had from students. So I'm just going to go to the final slide. The heart can be diseased, and the heart can be choked, and it can be pierced. Now, it can also work properly, but the end of all this for tonight is that we think about our own hearts, and we think about some underlying hatred we might have toward a family member, toward somebody in church, toward somebody at work. And whatever it is, if nobody knows about it, you just take care of that with you and God. But if it's known, and it's best to get it out and to say to others, I want to do better. Thank you very much for coming to class tonight. I appreciate it very much. Okay, I'm done. Not quite done, but I skipped over some stuff. You didn't mind that, did you? Okay.
Announcements before we turn it over or back over to Brother Ralph. The invitation song will be number 196. If you want to mark that in your songbooks, it'll be 196. As far as our prayer list is concerned, a couple of updates or additions. Continue to keep Martha Doss's brother-in-law, that whole family, in your prayers. They've had a lot of course, her brother-in-law passed away not last Sunday, but the Sunday before, unexpectedly. They've had a lot of difficulties getting a service organized and that sort of thing because of COVID and everything going on down in Atlanta. So keep her family in your prayers. Also, Kim Butcher, who some of you may know, she's worked at the Children's Clinic for quite a long time. She has COVID and is not doing real well here in the community. As far as other people on the prayer list, I don't know of any updates. And does anybody else know of any updates? or additions? No? All right, a couple of announcements. So tonight is the last night to sign up for the ladies' retreat. There's a sign-up list posted in the foyer. There's several ladies already going. If you'd like to go, please make sure you sign up tonight. Afterwards, if you decide next week that you want to go, you just need to go talk to my wife, and she'll tell you yay or nay, I guess. The cost is $40. When do people need to start paying that, Ashley? Not now. You don't need to start paying it now. But at some point, start saving your quarters and that sort of thing. It'll be $40. That's, of course, the weekend of October the 22nd. If you are interested in going and for whatever reason that $40 is a barrier, talk to one of the elders. Come talk to me or Ashley, and don't let money become a barrier as to why you don't go on that trip. So just kind of make it known that you'd like to go, and we'll make sure to get you taken care of. Due to the rise in cases of COVID, of course, there are a lot of cases here, even in Macon County, a lot of school systems around us closing. The fellowship hall has been reopened on Sunday mornings for services. There's already been 8 to 10 folks on average over there every Sunday morning. So if you are someone, if you are high risk or immunocompromised or whatever, and or if you just feel more comfortable meeting over there, that's why it's there. Don't feel like you are not a part of the service just because you're over there in the fellowship hall. And the same thing goes if you have to watch online. Again, if you are immunocompromised or for whatever reason you are high risk and you feel more comfortable watching online on Sunday mornings or on Wednesday nights or Sunday nights, it's okay to stay at home. Okay, God is not going to erase your name out of the book of life because you were trying to protect yourself. God has common sense too. If you are sick or feeling sick, please make good decisions as far as attending services as well. Just try to keep everybody safe. Just because you are young or even old and healthy and you're going to get past it, that's awesome. But you never know who you might shake hands with or something like that and spread it. So just make good decisions on that. I think we're all adults and we can make good decisions when it comes to that. This Sunday, we will be having a special contribution for the flooding that happened out in Humphreys County. If you would like to give online, you can do that now or at any point that you want to. We sent out a note on Realm for a link. You can also give right in the app if that's what you want to do. Of course, if you want to give the way that we have always given, they will be taking up a special contribution on Sunday morning for that. All of that money that is given will go to help the flooding, the stuff that was affected by the flooding in Humphreys County. Speaking of Realm, if you haven't signed up, please do. The elders are trying to make as big of a push as possible for people to sign up. If your spouse is signed up but you're not, go ahead and sign up too, because you never know when your spouse might be at work and you're at home and there's a message that goes out that you need, or maybe your spouse's phone gets dropped in some water in the pool and it's not working and there's a message that you need. You go ahead and get signed up too. We need as many people signed up as possible, just because that's going to become the primary method of communication for the church going forward. If you have questions about signing up, I can help you. Cameron can help. Go see one of our elders. If they can't help you, they will point you to me. Corey can help you. Just ask somebody and we'll get you taken care of. Youth news, not this weekend, but the next weekend. Seth Farmer will be with us, trying out for our youth minister position. If you have youth, it would be great if you could be here. We don't know the calendar yet, but that calendar will be sent out on Realm as soon as we know it. And of course, we'll announce it on Sunday morning too, once we know it and it's set in stone and all that good stuff. Any other announcements before I turn it back over to Ralph? Okay, Ralph.
There you go. Thank you for sharing this evening with us. Joyce and I have enjoyed being here with you. So what I got here is a cheap knife. Now, I do like good knives. You know, I like American-made knives. There's not many of them. You know, we go to flea markets and stuff, but there's just not many of them. If you do, they really are costly. This one is just really cheap. Matter of fact, it's made in Japan, and it's got the insignia out of it. I don't even know exactly what it is. However, I do know that it is an instrument. And since it is an instrument, it is sharper on one side than the other side, meaning that this knife has no moral status in the eyes of God whatsoever. It does not. It just depends on how I use it. That's it. So if I were to sharpen both sides and then wind up to be the stiletto killer or whatever of Macon County, you know, then the point then is that I've made a bad decision, but it's not the knife's fault. This knife is just an instrument. So I can use the knife for something that is instrumentally good, like peeling an orange or something. But I can use it for something that's instrumentally bad, like killing somebody. But one way or the other, it's just neutral. That's just all it is. Now, I can do another example like this. Money is the root of all evil, right? No. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil, because this money just happens to be morally neutral. It's what I do with it. You know, if I do something good with it, then it's instrumentally good. But if I, buy some crack or crank or whatever, with it, then all of a sudden it becomes instrumentally bad because I've used it for a bad thing. But one way or the other, it has no moral value in and of itself. Now I want to talk about the third thing. COVID. COVID does not have the ability to separate you from your Lord. As bad as it is, as many people, my wife had it in December, we both have been double shot, all that kind of stuff. As bad as COVID is, it does not have the ability to separate me from God. Therefore, it has zero moral value. Meaning that nothing that might or might not affect your relationship with God is not evil in and of itself. Okay, so money is not evil in and of itself. And a knife is not evil in and of itself. And COVID is not evil in and of itself. Why? Because it cannot drag you away from God. You can allow COVID to separate you from God, but COVID will not do it. COVID doesn't have any value whatsoever. If it turns out to be a man-made virus, which I think is probably a stretch, it is still not the virus that is evil. It would be the intentions of those who did it. Therefore, what am I trying to say is this. The only thing that will separate you that come between you and your God 100 times out of 100, it will do this 24/7, 365. It will do this all the time. The only thing that is intrinsically evil is not the Spanish flu of 1917. It's not the bubonic plague of the Middle Ages. It's not COVID. It's not COVID variant 2. It is not anything that is intrinsically evil like that, nor is it the Hurricane Ida. The only thing that will separate you from your God every time is sin. That's it. Sin is intrinsically wrong because you have missed the mark. Went deer hunting for the first time with guys. I kind of played around with it first year of our marriage, but I didn't know anything about it. But I went with some guys, knew something about deer hunting. In January, we went to West Texas. And so we had to try to do some, practicing, with the deer rifles, which I'd never shot one. And so there was a target out there at 100 yards. There was a target out there at 200 yards. And the guy who owned the ranch did not want us to wound his deer. As a matter of fact, he was trying to get rid of the deer that were culled deer, if you know what that means. And so the point then is that you take the rifle to see if you can hit what you're looking at. Now, why do you need to do that? Well, sometimes it's very important to be on target. And if you miss the target, the Greek word for that is I sinned. To miss the mark. I missed the mark. So if you aim at your target and you miss it, that's sin. What's the target? The will of God. What's the target? To live the right kind of life. What's the target? To do what God wants me to do. What's the target? To be pleasing in the eyes of God. That's the target. But when we sin, we mess up. And when we do that, that's what separates us from God. And it's not possible to get close to God again because He's holy and He's not close to sin unless you've done something to make those sins such that you can approach the throne of God. You know what that is? Is the blood of Christ. So when the blood of Christ covers you of your sin, when you become a Christian, you come before the throne of God boldly, Hebrews 4:16. You boldly come before the holy God. The problem is that people who say they want a relationship with God, they usually want it on their own terms. I want a relationship with God, but I don't want to do the church thing. I want a relationship with God, but I don't really read the Bible. I want a relationship with God, but I don't pray unless it's an emergency. Well, if you want a relationship with God, it is not COVID that's the problem. It is not money, and it is not a morally neutral knife. It is your choice to do something about your sin. And if you need to do that tonight, I hope you will. While together we stand and sing.
There's not a friend like the lonely Jesus. No, not one. No, not one. None else could heal all our soul's diseases. No, not one. No, not one. Jesus knows all about our struggles. He will guide till the day is done. There's not a friend like the lonely Jesus. No, not one. No, not one. No friend like Him is so high and holy. No, not one. No, not one. And yet no friend is so meek and lowly. No, not one. No, not one. Jesus knows all about our struggles. He will guide till the day is done. There's not a friend like the lowly Jesus. No, not one. No, not one. There's not an hour that He is not near us. No, not one. No, not one. No night so dark, but His love can cheer us. No, not one. No, not one. Jesus knows all about our struggles. He will guide till the day is done. There's not a friend like the lowly Jesus. No, not one. No, not one.
All right, good Lord willing, this Sunday, we'll meet together again at 9 for Bible study and at 10 o'clock for our worship hour. This Sunday I'll be doing the preaching. We're going to go back to the book of Matthew. We're going to look again at I will make you fishers of men. Yes, even you. If there's nothing else, Bobby, do you mind leading us in a prayer?
Let's bow. Most gracious Heavenly Father, well, thank you once again for another beautiful Lord's Day. Bless us with this day, Father. Father, thank you for the blessings you bestow upon us by being here tonight and hearing the Gilmore's words. Father, I'll ask you at this time to continue to bless those that are sick with the virus and other illnesses